As you move deeper into your awakening, something starts to happen that most people do not expect. It's not just your life changing, it's not just your relationships that are shifting, it's your emotional patterns that start to surface. And for many people, this leads back to one place, and that is the relationship that you had with your mother. Welcome to Shelby Radio. I am Shelby Carino, and this is episode number 739. And we are going to have this conversation about the mother wound and the awakening process with it, and why this mother wound shows up when you begin to change. So, welcome in. I am glad you are here. And I'm going to start off by saying that this is not about blaming your mother. This is not about labeling anyone as good or bad who may be the mother figure for you in your life. What this is about is understanding patterns. And the fact of the matter is that we all come from a maternal imprint. And that imprint shapes how we see ourselves, how we do love, how we do our relationships. And I want to just settle with this for a moment because I have an entire course built around this one topic. And it is all about healing the maternal bond. And as I have moved through this work with clients, they're always a little hesitant, especially women, to want to dive into the maternal piece. And it's because they either have a really good relationship with their mother and they're scared that if they address and bring awareness to this maternal imprint, that it would redo something in the relationship. Or other women, they are estranged from their mothers and they don't want to bring up the wound because they think they have healed it and they don't want to open things that they think have already been closed. And so what I tread lightly on is the fact that nothing's going to ever show up for you that you're not ready to have show up. And the truth of the matter is that we all have a maternal side to us, male or female, whatever body you're in. We all have this maternal way. Now, because we all come from the female body, our mothers have birthed us, whether our biological mother raised us or an adoptive parent raised us, and whether or not you even know who your biological mother is really beside the point to any of this topic of conversation, because at the end of the day, we all have an energetic footprint to the female who carried us in her body in the womb for an extended amount of time. And we all lived within that female's body energetically, emotionally, physically. We heard that mother's thoughts, felt the energy of fear, joy, sadness, anger. This is where our entire structure of this body of energy that grew inside that female body that we call mother formed. So we didn't just form a physical body with arms and legs and nose and eyes and ears and hair and all of the things. But we also were formed energetically, emotionally, all of it. And so it is only logic paired with some common sense that we are going to run patterns the way our mother did, the female who carried us into existence. We are going to play out those patterns. So this isn't about whether or not you need to blame that woman who carried you into the planet for reasons of why things happen in your life. And we don't need to label that pattern as a good pattern or bad pattern. We just need to understand what the pattern is so we can go in and reframe that energetically, emotionally, physically, spiritually, so we can get to the imprint for ourselves in how we want to do love in our world, how we want to do relationships in our world. And so when you come at it from a different perspective, then ideally there should be a desire to want to dive in to that maternal bond and really look at it and pick it apart and look at what the patterns are. Compare it to the patterns in our life now. What works? What doesn't work? Because I have spoken to so many women who have great relationships with their mother. And they say that, oh, I have a great relationship with my mom. I talk to her every day. She comes for every birthday, every holiday. But yet these women, even though they say that, there's always that, yeah, but we're a little too close, or I don't feel like I can tell her no, or sometimes I just don't answer the phone because I need a minute because she's calling me all the time. So we do this little mental thing with ourselves to make ourselves be okay with something maybe we're not okay with. Even if it looks like we're okay. Internally, we go, this isn't really healthy for me. It's a little too much. I want to have some separation. You know, we're a little too codependent emotionally with each other. And then there's women who really have no relationship with their mothers, don't even know who their mothers are. Maybe they were adopted or whatnot. And I've had many clients in that scenario that they wish that they could learn who their mother is or what her genealogy was. And so there's just two sides of the spectrum depending upon what your life is around that maternal imprint. And it's unique and individual for each person. Okay? So awareness, just an awareness to this mother imprint is what is important. And yes, behind the imprint, guaranteed there's going to be a wound. There always is. That's the point to this entire waking up process, discovering what that is. Okay? So I want to move into saying that just because the maternal imprint carries a series of information for you, it doesn't always mean there's trauma or abuse attached to it, especially directly to you. But the mother wound can show up as a feeling of having an emotional absence from your mother, or feeling like there's too much control coming from that maternal figure, or there's an inconsistency of how the mother has shown up in your world. Sometimes There's conditional love. I will give you this if you do this. And then there's also unmet emotional needs that can show up in the mother wound. So the mother wound is not always what happened to us. It's often what didn't happen that you actually needed in order to shift how you attract certain people into your world in the form of relationships. Now, personal story. I have spoken a lot about my mother and my relationship with my mother through time in my courses, in my podcast episodes. I even forgave her in my Soul Freedom and Soul Freedom Companion books when I was on my 48-day forgiveness journey. And at 52 years old now, looking back on my life and having varying perspectives, yes, I went through an initial I'm mad at my mother, not knowing I was mad at my mother period of time when a psychic told me I was very mad at my mother. And I was like, no, I'm not. I just spoke to her because I was living at my mom and dad's house when I had gotten my divorce from my first husband when I was 30. And so, but yet when I was living inside the family home, obviously I knew I wanted to pull away from my mother because I didn't ever want to go back into the family home. And basically I got married the first time to get away from my mother. And so, but did I know all of these things at the time? No, I didn't. I didn't know it until I went down the spiritual awakening path of myself and this mother imprint opened up. So of course I'm having reflections of my mother come off so I could see my mother's life. So I could see what my mother went through. So I could even remember certain things when I was in utero because I could see, hear, and feel back then. And so even though my journey took me to being estranged from my mother, that wasn't because I was seeking to be estranged from my mother. I was seeking to be in better alignment with my mother to create a better foundational relationship with my mother. However, what I realized as I went through my awakening journey, my mother chose to stay in her patterns. She did not become a willing participant alongside me to do the mother-daughter work and keep the relationship in. So if anything, she began blaming me for everything going astray. And that is where I went into a deeper maternal wound of a healing to go, how could my mother blame me when I'm just walking out what was imprinted within me? So that led me to learning about emotional manipulation, the control emotionally, the inconsistency of conversations, the conditions of, well, if you come in, I'll give you this. If you don't come in, I'm not going to give you that. And just emotionally, these needs that were not met because I realized they weren't met for my own mother back in her growing up process. So I had to get to a place of acceptance in that awareness. And it wasn't that I didn't try to bring her back in. It was just not good for her to come back in because of the imprint her mother left on her. And it was for my mother to now be in that imprint, and that no longer had to do with me. So true unconditional love, even for your mother, is respecting their journey when you're waking up in your journey. And so that mother imprint does shape our identity, because that's where we learned how to be loved. That's where we learned how to be accepted. And that's where we learned how to be safe. And this creates patterns like wanting to people please, wanting to overgive, the fear of rejection if we don't do something, having an emotional shutdown. So we need to remind ourselves that we didn't just grow up within this. We adapted to these imprints. So the question I had to ask myself when I first started waking up my energy and consciousness was, why is it showing up now? And then I got to a place of, oh, well, it's always been there. I just wasn't ready to see it. Or I didn't have the right tools yet to address it. But the reason it shows up a lot more during your awakening process is because awakening your energy, your consciousness, increases your awareness. What I've been talking about in all of my content, whether it's Shelby Radio, whether it's what I put out on my Instagram page at Shelby Carino, if you're on my business page on Facebook, if you're in my Twin Flame Tribe group, I talk about awareness everywhere. Because awakening brings awareness to things we may not wanted to be aware of before. And it's because we stop operating on autopilot, where we're just doing this to do this, to do this, to do this. Like, we stop that. And we begin to see the patterns very clearly. So awakening doesn't create the wound. The wound is already there. It reveals it. Let that sink in. Awakening never creates the wound. It reveals it. Because your nervous system begins processing what is now waking up in your auric field, that spiritual energy of yours that was formed through the body of your mother. So the nervous system wakes up and goes, oh, I need to start doing something with this. So that's why old emotional responses begin to surface. And this can all come through in the form of anxiety, feeling like someone's sitting on your chest. These are moments in time where you really need to get into doing the work, which is why I have my curriculum out there, because it has the frequencies to help balance the anxieties that come up in the nervous system through the awareness that's being brought up, that is creating that emotional trigger. So you're not having to do this alone, okay? You just have to get to a place of acceptance to want the help, to see a different way, to understand energy and frequency in the form of anxiety didn't just happen. There's ways to harmonize that without just having to comatose yourself, right, in prescription medications. We have to get back to the energetic structure of healing and harmonization. So how this all shows up when the mother energy comes in is you begin to feel triggered in your relationships. You react stronger to people than you expected to react. You feel like nobody sees you or you're misunderstood all the time. You begin questioning if you're good enough. Do I bring any kind of worth to my job, my family, my relationships? And none of this is overreacting. You're not overreacting. You're recognizing that something that's always been there is actually still there. Hence the awareness. So the hard truth that we all have to get to at certain points in time, rewind. Okay, I even stumbled on the truth here, okay? Isn't that what happens in awakening? We stumble on the truth, okay? So the hard truth is you can't really become a new version of yourself without understanding what shaped the old version of yourself. And that is directly linked to the maternal energy. So this is never about staying stuck in it. We don't want you stuck. Absolutely not. This is about awareness to lead to a choice in order to harmonize the wound in your own maternal energy that stemmed from what you were born into. So awareness is the beginning of the healing. And you don't have to repeat the patterns. You will until you don't. But you can choose differently. And you are not responsible for how you were shaped. But you are responsible for what you do with the awareness that shaped you. So if this is coming up for you right now in your process, it is not random. It's not happening to break you. It's happening so you can see clearly. And when you can see clearly, you can choose differently. So if this really hit home with you today, I strongly encourage and support you to look at the Healing Maternal Bonds course on my website, ShelbyCarino.com, under courses, and just read about it. Just browse through it. Even if it's just hard for you just to click on the website, maybe that's your first step. Because the mother is so powerful. It's such a powerful energy within us that we have to want to address it within us to address it outside of us. And that's what makes us stronger women, specifically. Stronger mothers. Okay? Better mothers. Better Mother Teresas. Because we're going where a lot of times we don't want to go. But that's what we have to do. So, thank you for listening. This is a part of the Awakening series I'm doing here on Shelby Radio. And in the next episode, I am going to talk about something that happens after this mother wound awareness, and that is spiritual burnout. So follow along for next week's episode, and I will be back same time, same place next week. Until then, take care.